It's 3 a.m. You're awake. Not sick, not scared, nothing woke you. You're just awake, eyes open in the dark, mind unusually clear. And your first thought is the one you have every time. Something is wrong with me. You do the math on how many hours are left. You start the quiet negotiation about how bad tomorrow's going to be. Here's what nobody told you. That wake up isn't a malfunction. It isn't stress or age or a sleep disorder. It's a memory. It's the oldest survival behavior your species has. And it's still firing in a body that has nowhere left to put it. Because for almost the entire history of human beings, nobody slept 8 hours in a row. Not once, not anywhere. The idea is younger than the light bulb. What they did instead is stranger and darker than the myth. They slept in 2 separate blocks, with a window of wakefulness sitting in the middle of the night that every single person knew about and nobody needed explained. They slept in a staggered rotation so that, at any hour, somebody in that camp was awake, and it wasn't organized, nobody agreed to it, it happened automatically, and the reason it had to happen is the most disturbing part of this whole story. They slept on plants they selected on purpose, and not for comfort. And when researchers took modern people and took the light away for a month, every single one of them slid back into the ancient pattern, without being told, without knowing it existed. Everyone. The old program is still installed in you. The modern world just never lets it finish running. Stay to the end, because there's one thing your ancestors felt in that middle hour, every night of their lives, that you have almost certainly never experienced, and there's a specific reason it was taken from you. Start with the number itself, 8 hours. Ask where it comes from, and you'll get a shrug and something vague about science. But there's no ancient text prescribing 8 hours, no physician in antiquity recommending it, no tradition anywhere on earth treating one unbroken block as the natural human state. It's an industrial number. 8 for work, 8 for rest, 8 for whatever's left. A day cut into 3 equal pieces because 3 divides neatly into 24, and because a shift has to start when the last one ends. It was designed around the machine, then handed to you as though it came from your body. And the moment that number existed, everything that didn't match it got renamed. Waking in the night stopped being normal and became a symptom, something to fix, something to medicate. The behavior never changed, only the label did. Which leaves one very uncomfortable question, and it's the question this entire video is built to answer. If this pattern survived for 300,000 years, it isn't a leftover. It isn't a bug evolution forgot to clean up. Nothing survives that long unless it's doing a job. So what was the job? The answer isn't about rest at all. It's about what was standing just outside the firelight. First, almost everything you've ever seen about this gets the opening fact wrong. The image is always the same. A figure curled on bare rock, deep in a cave, as though our ancestors spent 300,000 years lying on the floor. They didn't. They built beds, and we can date the habit. At a site in South Africa called Border Cave, archaeologists working under Lynn Wadley found something that had no business surviving. Layers of compacted grass bedding, preserved in ash, dated to roughly 200,000 years old. That's older than our species leaving Africa, older than cave art, older than almost anything you'd call human history. But they didn't build those beds for comfort. The bedding sits on ash, deliberately laid. Ash dries the ground and suppresses insects. It stops the biting things climbing up into a body that's about to lie still for hours. And at a second South African site, Sibutu, around 77,000 years old, it gets more deliberate still. Researchers identified leaves from a specific plant, Cryptocarya woodii, layered into the bedding. That plant produces compounds that repel insects. Not grass, not whatever was nearest. One species chosen. Which means somebody noticed that sleeping on one plant meant fewer bites than another, held that observation long enough to trust it, then walked past every easier option to go and cut the right one, and did it again, and taught their children to do it. Now ask yourself why anyone would go to that much trouble over a place to lie down. Because they weren't decorating. Every one of those choices is a defense against the things in the ground and the things in the dark and the fact that in a few minutes you're going to close your eyes and stop being able to defend yourself at all. They engineered the bed because they were terrified of the night. And the bed only solved the small problem. Because here's what none of this explains yet. Sleep makes you helpless. It shuts down the most dangerous animal on the planet for hours at a time, in the open, surrounded by things that hunt in the dark. So why would evolution keep it? Why would a species with that much to lose go unconscious every night for 300,000 years, unless it had found a way to never be fully unconscious at all? That's exactly what it found. Picture the actual stakes. A band of maybe 30 people, no walls, no door, fire that will burn down by the middle of the night unless somebody feeds it. And every adult in that group is irreplaceable. One knows where water is in a dry year. One can read a track. One remembers what the elders did the last time the herds moved early. That knowledge exists in their heads and nowhere else on earth. One bad night doesn't cost you a person. It costs you the water, the route, the technique, things that took a lifetime to learn and can't be rebuilt in a season. So the night was never rest. It was the single most expensive risk your ancestors took, and they took it every 24 hours forever. How did anyone survive that? An anthropologist named David Sampson went looking for the answer among people who still sleep the way humans have always slept, the Hadza hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. He fitted sleep tracking devices across the camp and watched, not individuals, but the group as a system. And the result is one of those findings you have to read twice. Across the entire study, there was almost never a moment when every person was fully asleep at the same time. Someone was always up, or half up, or drifting in that shallow layer where a sound still registers. Nobody organized it. There was no rota, no shift, nobody saying you take midnight to 2. It happened because of age. Older adults fall asleep earlier and wake earlier. Younger adults stay up later and sleep in. Stack those different internal clocks inside one camp, and the group generates continuous coverage by accident. The old are still awake at the start of the night. The young are still awake at the end. The middle is covered by whoever's stirring. The Sampson called it the sentinel hypothesis. A guard rotation nobody has to invent, staffed automatically by the simple fact that humans of different ages sleep at different times. Now here's where it gets personal. That thing your family complains about. Grandparents up at 5. Teenagers who physically cannot get out of bed. It isn't a flaw in any of them. It's the alarm system, still running, in a house with locks on the doors. And once you understand that nobody was ever fully unconscious, the shape of the night itself starts to make sense. A historian named Roger Eck Erck spent years reading what nobody reads: court depositions, medical texts, prayer books, diaries, plays. And he kept tripping over the same 2 phrases, used the way you'd say lunch, first sleep and second sleep, across hundreds of references, over centuries and languages, in sources with no connection to each other. And nobody was explaining it. That's the detail that gives it away. You don't explain the obvious. A witness in a criminal case could testify that something happened after first sleep and expect the court to know exactly what hour that meant. Here's the shape of the night. Darkness falls. People go down soon after. There's nothing else to do, and light costs money. They sleep hard for 3 or 4 hours. That's first sleep. Then, around midnight, they wake, not startled, not from a nightmare, just up, and they stay up, an hour, sometimes 2. Then back down for second sleep, until light. And that gap in the middle wasn't endured. It was used. People fed the fire, checked children, talked quietly to whoever was awake beside them, prayed. There were devotions written specifically for that hour, printed and sold, because a reliable market of people were reliably conscious in the middle of the night. And then there's the part that got quietly edited out of the story. That window was widely understood as the hour for sex. Not hinted at, recommended, in writing by physicians of the period as practical advice, and the reasoning was almost aggressively unromantic. After first sleep, both people were rested, the day had been slept off, and there were hours of darkness left with nothing scheduled in them. Doing it at the end of a working day when both of you were spent was considered the inferior option. So for most of human history, there was a designated hour in the middle of the night that everyone knew about and nobody had to be told about, and the modern world deleted it, not by banning anything, just by flooding that hour with light and stripping away the sleep on either side of it. Some nights, nothing happened in it at all. People just lay there in the dark, awake, expecting nothing of themselves. Now think about the last time you woke at 3 a.m. Same body, same hour, same behavior. The only thing that changed is that you've been taught it's a symptom. Now, an old pattern in old documents is one thing. You could argue it was cultural, a habit people had because their lives were dark and boring, which is exactly what a psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health, Thomas Vare, set out to test. His design was simple and slightly brutal. Take modern people, normal jobs, normal electric light lives, and put them in 14 hours of darkness every night. No lamps, no screens, no candles, just dark, and leave them there for weeks. Nobody was told about first sleep. Nobody was told what was supposed to happen. They were just given the nights back. At first, they did what exhausted modern people do. They slept enormously, clearing a debt they didn't know they'd been carrying. And then, once that cleared, what happened next is the part nobody expected, including the researchers. Their sleep split in two. A block of sleep, a long stretch of quiet wakefulness, another block of sleep. Modern people in a lab, with no instruction and no knowledge of the historical record, spontaneously rebuilt a pattern that had been out of use for a century. That's the moment this stops being history. It isn't a custom. It's what your body does the second you stop overriding it. But the finding that matters most wasn't the split. It was what Ver measured in their blood during the middle window. Elevated prolactin, associated with a state of still, quiet calm, the state you see in animals at rest, not asleep, not alert, something in between that we don't really have a word for anymore. The participants described it themselves, not restless, not bored, a kind of floating, peaceful, meditative consciousness. And Ver's observation was that most modern humans have simply never experienced it. There is a room in the middle of your night. Your ancestors sat in it every night of their lives. You've probably never been inside it. And if you've ever woken at 3 a.m. and felt like something was wrong with you, subscribe, because most people feel that and never think about it again. This channel is where it gets explained. Because there's still one question left. What were they doing with all those hours? The answer is where we stopped being animals that survived the night and became something else. The night wasn't empty, it had a center, and the center was fire. Put yourself there. You're on grass somebody cut and carried. The ground beneath it is warm. There was a fire on that spot earlier, and the heat is still rising through the ash. Past your feet, the air is cold enough that you can feel exactly where the warmth ends. 10 feet away, low flames. Someone sitting beside them not doing much, feeding it when it drops. You don't know who. You don't need to. Beyond that, black, not dark like a room with the lights off, black like a wall. And in it, sound, something moving through grass a long way out, then closer, then nothing. Nobody sits up. The fire is between you and it, and everyone here has spent their entire life learning exactly what that means. That ring of light is about 20 feet across. 20 feet. That's the entire margin. That's the whole difference between your ancestors and everything that ate them. And every single night, something could walk right up to the edge of that circle and decide whether you lived. They slept anyway. Because there was no other option, and because somebody was always awake. Everything your species became, it became inside that ring. Because fire doesn't just change what you can see, it changes what darkness is. Predators hesitate at the edge, the temperature holds. But the real change was time. Before fire, the hours after sunset were dead hours. Hours to survive. After fire, they became hours you could use. And humans filled them. An anthropologist named Polly Wiesner spent years among the Jutwa Sea in the Kalahari, recording what people actually talked about. Then compared daytime conversation with firelight conversation. Daytime talk was practical. Logistics, complaints, who did what, who owes what, plans for tomorrow. At night, by the fire, it flipped almost entirely. Firelit conversation was overwhelmingly storytelling, about people who weren't there, about the dead, about places over the horizon, about things that happened before anyone present was born. Same people, same day, different hour, different mind. And storytelling is how a group transmits everything it can't demonstrate. History, ancestry, obligation, the reason things are the way they are. Culture, in other words. It lived in the dark hours, in the gaps between sleeps, in exactly the window that no longer exists in your life. So where did it go? Not slowly. That's what people get wrong. This wasn't a drift over centuries. Cheap, bright, on-demand light arrives, and within a couple of generations, the middle of the night is simply deleted. The mechanism is happening to you tonight. Your brain reads light as the answer to one question. Is it daytime? Bright light, late in the evening, returns yes, and melatonin gets pushed back. The whole descent into sleep starts later, gets compressed, and has to be crammed into whatever hours are left before an alarm. There's no room for a 2-block night, so it flattens into one, and the wake-up that used to sit calmly in the middle now surfaces at 3 a.m. with nowhere to go. And notice what makes it worse. Your ancestor woke into a world that was still dark, still quiet, and asked nothing of them. You wake into an alarm set 6 hours out, a schedule that starts whether you slept or not, and a glowing rectangle within arm's reach that will happily tell your brain it's daytime at 3 in the morning. The wake-up is identical. The room you wake into is not. And when researchers have sent people camping, natural light and firelight only, no screens, the internal clock has been observed to shift substantially back within about a week. Melatonin timing moves towards sunset again. Sleep improves. No pills, no technique, no discipline. The system was never broken. It was being overwritten every single night. So here's where it lands. Tonight, you might wake up, and you'll feel that small drop in your chest, the not again feeling, the sense that your body is failing you. Understand what's actually happening. You are running a program written across 300,000 years. By people who slept on plants they chose for a reason, in groups that guarded each other without ever agreeing to, in nights built from 2 sleeps, with a room in the middle where they talked and prayed and told each other who they were. You still have the room. It still opens at the same hour. You were just never told it existed, so when the door swings open, you assume something's gone wrong. You're not broken. You're a Paleolithic animal, running Paleolithic software in a world that has erased the night it was designed for, and then charged you for the sleeping pills. You didn't inherit their tools. You didn't inherit their fire. You didn't inherit their beds. You inherited their night. And the part of you that stands watching it has never once turned off. You just don't recognize it anymore. But you will now. The next time you wake at 3 a.m., you won't lie there thinking something's wrong with you. You'll know exactly what just switched on. So tell me, are you one of them? Do you wake in that window, and when you do, what do you actually do with it? Lie there, reach for your phone, get up, put it in the comments. I want to see how many of you have been sitting in that room without knowing it had a name. And if you want the other half of this, what your ancestors did with the hours they weren't trying to sleep, and why the things they chose for fun are stranger than anything they did to survive, that one's on screen.